Another approach to take, particularly with vets or active duty military, and again, I had one counselor in Sacramento who said this wasn't the approach that she would take, but I think it's a valid approach, is to have an enemy. Especially the all-volunteer force, they're in many ways trained to be protectors, to rise up and defend their country or their loved ones against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I like to make the case that this is the enemy, the limbic brain. What I'm going to teach you today is the most under-taught area in psychology, brain science, or mind-body. It's not under-known. I'll let you be the judge of why it's under-taught. What three major industries don't want you to know what I'm teaching you today? What three major industries make a fortune off of people's misery? But you should know the history of what is the limbic brain and how does it affect you. The brain scientists say that the limbic brain generates over 90% of your negative emotions, your worries, hurts, angers, and fears. People go, why do we have this? It sounds horrible. We have it because in our evolutionary past, it kept you alive as a species. As a species, we were actually more survivable, miserable than happy. Think about it. Back in cave person days, if you went wandering through the meadow, oh, isn't life great? Something would make you lunch, okay? And I won't name names, but one of my instructors, when she first heard me say that, she loves figuring things out. She got all excited and she went, ooh, the original Happy Meal. You know? Well, what's happened is our technology has advanced exponentially more rapidly than the physiology can change. And so now, in most Western worlds, this appendix of the brain most of the time works against us rather than for us. 200 years ago, even if you lived where I live in Arizona, you might go your whole life and never see a stagecoach crash or even hear about one. But if you commute to work and you listen to the radio or TV for traffic patterns, how many accidents do you hear about every day? And that keeps us more limbic. And yes, it's wonderful that we can keep in touch with our loved ones that are in the military, but it's also a curse. Because, you know, a lot of times we're not able to be told exactly where they are. And so any incident that makes the news that's anywhere near where they are, we assume it was them. I probably shouldn't name on film, you know, base that my son's at, but recently there was a pretty big suicide bombing attack in Afghanistan, and his poor wife and my wife were, you know, desperate for news because it wasn't until days later they found out it wasn't anywhere near him. But your mind automatically goes to the worst, and that's an example of how advances in technology work against us. Even if you didn't have somebody in the military, the advances in communications technology make this worse. You know, back in the days of Pony Express, you wouldn't have heard about the shooting in Norway for maybe forever. But now to fill air, the 24-hour news channels, they're bombarding us with disaster news from somewhere. I had one friend who actually thought CNN stood for constant negative news. And all of that keeps people more on edge. And by the way, for the dependents, that's like a sunburn on Irish fair skin before you even get a piece of news about your loved one. You understand? And that's why this technique for how to counter limbic is so valuable. We actually learned the first hints of how to counter limbic brain as far back as World War I. World War I, the weapons weren't quite as powerful, and the doctors found that if someone was shot in the head and they lived, but they had damage, you see in your picture here, right above the limbic system, there's a small area of the brain called the septum pellucidum. I bet you find a lot of doctors don't even know that name. It's amazing how much this isn't taught in medical school anymore. The septum pellucidum is primarily a fluid-filled sac. So this didn't make sense to them. They found that people who had damage in that area always developed the condition the doctors call anhedonia, inability to experience joy or pleasurable feelings of any kind. That caused Dr. Robert Heath of Tulane University Medical School to go looking at that area with his postdoctoral research. Now, he obviously verified it's mostly a fluid-filled sac. His huge breakthrough discovery was that at the front of that sac, he discovered a bundle of nerve fibers. Think of harp strings that extend down to the same spot in the hypothalamus that is the major mood elevation center in the brain. Okay? And because we have some clinicians here, and we may have others watching, I'm going to go a little more technical than many of you need to know, so try not to snooze out on me. But that spot in the hypothalamus is the same spot that opium affects. Now you say opium and people go, well, opium is a plant endorphin. You all know the uplifting mood effect of endorphins, the runner's high. It's why we get a mood lift when we exercise. Opium is an addictive drug because it's a plant-based endorphin, not a mammalian-based. So it sticks. It jams the receptor sites. But that's the spot that these fibers connect in. And let me give you a feel for how much Heath's work was lost or maybe suppressed by these three industries. How many of you have heard of people who have a pacemaker for their heart? Pretty common knowledge, right? I'll bet you've never heard what I'm going to tell you next. Heath, that discovery of those fibers got Heath promoted to be the dean of Tulane University Medical School. He then went on to do decades, not months, not years, decades of fully documented treatment of severely depressed or anxious, worried patients. And in some ways, PTSD is a combination of worry and depression all mixed together. He actually would surgically implant a permanent electrode into those fibers connected to a battery pack. And when people had regular pulses there, they could come out of their catatonic depression, they could function normally in life. His work was so well known by the dawn of the 60s. If you remember Timothy Leary, Mr. LSD, I've seen video of him where they're asking him on camera, aren't you afraid of what you're doing to America's youth with this LSD for, mind expansion and feeling better? And his response on camera is, nah, this is nothing. We're all going to have septal implants by the next generation. Kids will be asking for them for Christmas. I'm almost 13. Can you get me my septal implant? And by the way, anyone out there who has kids, everybody knows they've proven scientifically that insanity is hereditary. You get it from your kids? No? But all the more reason to know these when they hit that age. What I basically said, and if I'm not going conspiracy theory, if I'm trying to say why did Heath's research become forgotten, I think it's because of the discovery of LSD. LSD changed overnight brain science from electrode implantation approaches to pharmacology, to drugs, to what chemicals can we throw at the brain. That's basically one reason. I was lecturing in Denver, and this one doctor said, oh, that's not why nobody went into mind-body. I said, what do you mean? He goes, it's another one of your stupid business practices, Sanders. Nobody went into mind-body because there's no money in it. You teach people how to find those fibers and trigger them. They own it for the rest of their life. It's a lot more profitable to sell a pill. And by the way, not to beat up on the pharmaceutical companies, what drug has humanity in every culture for millenniums used to soothe limbic distress? Alcohol. Problem with alcohol, it's a really inefficient drug. to get full limbic soothing, actually suppression, not soothing, you got to drink so much, the side effects are worse. When I lecture to college kids or young kids in the military, I appeal to their cheapness. Why make Budweiser rich? You know, have a beer to be social, but do this technique to deal with your stresses. And again, many family members at home, they're using the wine to self-medicate. Have a glass of wine. Actually, 1 ounce of alcohol is good for heart health, but let the bottle last the week and save your liver and medical health care costs. You know, it's all wrapped up together. When you can be taught, and you can very easily, where those fibers are and how to tickle them, like strumming a harp, you can get the same benefit as the electrode implantation without the invasiveness of the surgery. So that's what we're going to teach you.